Now, just a little warning before we begin, there will be spoilers in this video for the first 4 episodes of Kenobi, so if you haven't seen them yet and you don't want anything ruined, it is a really good time to click away. Okay, and one other thing quickly before jumping into this. Whenever I do videos like these, it inevitably brings out comments about me being too nitpicky or too critical, and I get asked why I can't just enjoy Star Wars for what it is and appreciate the fact that we get it at all. And though I could give a very long-winded answer to that, all I'll say right now is, consider the possibility that what we're looking for out of a Star Wars story, be it a show, movie, or whatever, is not the same, or that different things are important to different fans. For me, consistency is king and substance is more important than spectacle, which isn't to say I don't enjoy a good Star Wars spectacle, I most certainly do. But simply put, I want the people making Star Wars to care as much about the in-universe lore and out-of-universe history of the franchise as much as I do. And if that's not you, if that's not your concern or something you're all that interested in, if you just want to enjoy it for what it is, that is absolutely fine by me. I'm not here to define what a Star Wars fan is or has to be, or to get angry that others don't like what I do about it. I respect the fact that you enjoy Star Wars for different reasons than I do, and all I ask for in return is that same level of respect, and to understand my criticism comes from a place of love, not hate, no matter how it may sound. Alright, all that said, let's start to dissect all of this with Leia in the Kenobi series a bit more. And I say a bit more because in yesterday's review of the 4th episode, I started to talk about how one of the major problems with the story, with Leia being rescued by Obi-Wan Kenobi after her being taken the first time and then the second time, is it brings a heck of a lot of suspicion down upon the Organa family, and Bail Organa in particular. So much so that you would think it would be very difficult for him, for Bail, and eventually Leia, who at the age of 10 is now basically known as a Jedi sympathizer after lying to an Inquisitor in the previous episode. Anyway, it'd make it very difficult to do anything and everything he, or eventually she, needs to do as a founding member of the Rebel Alliance without being watched like a hawk by the Empire, and the Sith in particular, or the Inquisitors and the Sith. I mean, Bail's daughter is kidnapped, and a Jedi, one who's been kind of off the grid for 10 years, immediately shows up to rescue her not once, but twice. But it's even worse than that for him when you really stop and think about it, and all this does is make Bail, and actually Obi-Wan as well, look pretty foolish here, because Leia's kidnapping is not widely known. It's not being plastered all over the HoloNet like some sort of galactic Amber Alert. It's all purposely being kept on the down low by Bail himself. Which then pretty much means the only likely way Obi-Wan heard about it and responded so quickly to her kidnapping is if he was directly contacted by Bail Organa himself and told what was happening. And yes, Bail doesn't know who kidnapped Leia at first, that's established in the show. He doesn't know the Empire or Reva, an Inquisitor, is behind it, and he thinks it's probably someone looking to collect a ransom. He also says he doesn't want to take this to the Senate because it might draw too much attention, meaning too much attention to Leia, and people might start looking too much into who she really is or where she comes from and why someone would take her beyond just trying to get some credits for a ransom. Problem here is, if the Empire finds out that Leia was kidnapped, which we of course know they will since they're kind of behind it, and then they learn that Bail Organa went to a Jedi to rescue her over trusting them to find her, well, that does more than make Bail look suspicious. That makes him look pretty much guilty of knowing and hiding a Jedi and being a traitor to the Empire. And yeah, I understand he wants his daughter back above all else, and initially he has no idea the Empire is involved, and so he thinks Kenobi could potentially be the best person for this job. But he has to realize if anything at all goes wrong, that in theory, it will draw far more attention to Leia and himself than him going to the Senate about her being kidnapped. Again, pretty much the very last thing he'd want is for the Empire to know he has any sort of connection to the Jedi at all. It should not only end his career and potentially his life, but he also knows the location of Luke is in jeopardy as well, since he could be taken and tortured or mind probed and who knows what else. And so in all reality, he would have been better going to the Senate, making it public, and then secretly asking Kenobi for help. There's much more plausible deniability should it be discovered by the Empire that a Jedi is the one who saved Leia, if Kenobi is the one who saved Leia, that he could have just heard about it from anywhere and everywhere on, again, something like the HoloNet. Basically, Bail Organa is taking a huge risk by going to Kenobi with all of this, as is Obi-Wan taking a giant risk by going to save her. He too should know how bad it could be for both Bail and Leia if the Empire finds out he went to rescue her when it wasn't widely known that she was kidnapped, again implying that Bail and Kenobi have a direct communication with each other. And of course, as we know, the Empire most certainly does know about the kidnapping and who went to rescue her and who almost certainly had to make the request in the first place. Hell, it's that connection between Bail and Obi-Wan that Reva was even banking on working in the first place. And speaking of that connection, why is it never used or exploited again? How does the Empire or Vader just sit back and let Bail Organa go about his daily life or go back to work in the Senate as usual, and let Leia go home and eventually become a senator herself without ever trying to use them or lure out Kenobi again? And if you say it's because the show will end with Vader thinking Kenobi is dead, well, for one, that doesn't excuse or pardon Bail for going to Obi-Wan, to a Jedi in the first place, or Leia for not giving up the location of the hidden Jedi path, if you will. Again, in the eyes of the Empire, they are both committing treason, and in all reality, there would be nothing that saves them from consequences. Though, I can already see the show using some type of excuse that going after them, trying to, say, prosecute them, if you will generate too much sympathy in the Senate, even though, last I checked, Palpatine is the Senate, right? But it's likely the reason the show will go with anyway. But that still doesn't solve the problem of Bail now very much being on the Empire's radar and being watched very, very carefully from then on. The other problem here is we know Vader doesn't think Kenobi is dead. Not only is he still looking for him in Rebels, but he says this when he encounters him again in A New Hope.
I've been waiting for you, Obi-Wan. We meet again at last.
Which very much implies he has all along thought Obi-Wan was still alive and well, no matter what is going to happen at the end of this Obi-Wan Kenobi series. But that is, of course, just one of the many problems the show is creating with the continuity or the canon, and though I won't get into all of them, there is another sort of major one that I'm going to address here, which is that Leia clearly knows who Obi-Wan Kenobi is now. She has his name said directly to her in this latest episode. And at first I thought they were trying to be very clever by only having her hear the name Ben, or hear him referred to as Ben. I thought this could kinda maybe make sense as to why she doesn't seem to know who Obi-Wan Kenobi is when she sends that famous message to him in A New Hope, which makes it sound like the two have never met each other. But now we know quite clearly they have not only met, but the end of the 4th episode with the hand-holding scene implies a great deal of care for each other is developing. I think when all is said and done, Leia might expect him to help her once again if the need should ever arise. So why in that message in A New Hope does she reference things like serving her father in the Clone Wars or call him General Kenobi? I mean, she personally knows him as Ben and could reference that actual time spent together. And I know and have heard the excuses for this one, that she's trying to send a very formal request or something along those lines, since she's not a 10-year-old girl anymore, she is a senator. But why do that when you can just appeal to the person you already know and who has helped you and rescued you before? Why do that with someone who is your friend and who you care about and who cares about you? And along these same lines, Leia doesn't seem too concerned about the fate of Obi-Wan Kenobi during the Death Star rescue in A New Hope. Certainly nowhere near as concerned as she was in the 3rd part of the Kenobi series, when she all but begs Tala to go back and help him or to save him because she has this feeling he is going to die or whatever. But then in A New Hope, after, yes, initially sounding very excited to hear that Luke is here with Ben Kenobi.
Ben Kenobi, where is he? Come on!
Which could be interpreted as her knowing him and recognizing the name and everything, or maybe it could be interpreted as excitement at knowing the guy she sent an extremely important message to actually got the message and showed up. Either way, she doesn't again inquire about him in any way, shape, or form, or seem concerned about making sure Obi-Wan escapes along with them. In fact, the only thing she says immediately after he dies is this. And sure, she's not wrong, it's too late, there's nothing they can do for him now, and the mission does have to come first. But you would almost think immediately afterwards on the Falcon, when Luke is grieving Obi-Wan's death and Leia comes to comfort him, that she might be a touch broken up about the death of the guy who saved her life and she once cared so much about. Maybe a little regret too that sending a message to her friend got him killed. And yes, even I will acknowledge this is getting rather nitpicky, because I also know how strong Leia is, and that she will even later say in this movie how there's no time to mourn the loss of her entire homeworld. I don't need or expect every little tiny thing to always line up perfectly, but my point here is that those who made the show clearly either didn't care or realize how off certain things would now feel in A New Hope, and even beyond that with the story they were telling here. In previous videos, I've talked a lot about how odd it is that in The Empire Strikes Back, Obi-Wan doesn't seem to think Leia is another Hope after Luke runs off to save his friends. And some have defended that by saying Obi-Wan had been so focused on Luke for so long that in that moment he kind of forgets about Leia, which is maybe an acceptable answer. Yet in this series, one of the reasons he agrees to go and save Leia is that Bail reminds him that she is just as important as Luke is, which means that he should both think she's important later on or in The Empire Strikes Back, or that she could be another Hope that could be trained. And it also means it's not likely he's completely forgotten that time he saved her multiple times, had a little mini adventure with her, the only adventure he's had in the past 20 years that we know of, and that he actually came to really care about her. Now sure, as also discussed in other videos, maybe the series is showing us that Kenobi will come to believe that Leia is not Force sensitive and somehow Yoda just knows better because he's Yoda. Maybe the series will explain what could certainly be viewed as a plot hole in the series, that somehow Kenobi, in that moment, forgets about the existence of Leia. But that explanation is coming at the expense of other issues being created, like, again, how life ever returns to normal for the Organas, how the Empire doesn't have them thoroughly investigated and watched henceforth. How do they become founding members of the rebellion if they're going to be watched so closely because of their previous association with the Jedi? And again here, maybe these things don't bother you at all or too much, which is absolutely fine. I'm not trying to complain to make you hate the series, I'm just pointing out issues I and other people are having with it. And maybe they wouldn't bother me as much if they were a little less blatant and if the show was just a little better overall. Which isn't to say I think it's been absolutely terrible or there's nothing to like about it. I think there are things that, if it were done differently, could be really good here. But I think its biggest issue so far is that it has failed to justify its existence. It's failed to explain to me why this was a story that needed to be told or created beyond just getting Ewan and Hayden back on screen together and to sell some Disney Plus subscriptions with the promise of a rematch of the century. And yes, we have 2 episodes left, and anything could happen in them. All my questions could be answered perfectly, and this could somehow fit seamlessly into the rest of the story, and I could be eating my words in a couple weeks, which I'd actually be happy to do, because I do so desperately want this series to be amazing and something all fans could rally behind and enjoy and talk about. But right now, I honestly don't know how they would ever be able to pull that off. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me if all these inconsistencies bother you or not, and what you think of this series overall. Whatever the case may be, again, take to the comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.